Good evening and welcome back to the 2D podcast. Soren Petro with you from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus. Catch his great work at pff.com. And, of course, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. And we are on to the Super Bowl and on to the hirings. A lot going on in the NFL this time of year. The dead week before a game is played, but we've got a lawsuit of the NFL, Brian Flores, a class action lawsuit against the entire league, and some strong allegations. We'll talk about that. Chiefs losing Mike Kafka, their quarterback coach, to the New York Giants as the offensive coordinator. Eric Bieniemy interviewing in New Orleans. We've got head coaching hires this week. I think Nathaniel Hackett probably happened last week about this time. I don't know that we got to it much, but Josh McDaniels in Vegas, Brian Dable in New York, Kevin O'Connell headed to Minnesota. What happens with Mahomes and Allen? Losing important coaches with them. Tom Brady retiring. Garoppolo's future. There's a new name in Washington. Talk about that and much, much more here on the 2D podcast. But let's start with the biggest news. Jeff, I'll begin with you. Brian Flores, in a move that history tells us will end his coaching career. When people have sued leagues, it has not gone well. Kurt Flood, suing for free agency in baseball, never played again. Colin Kaepernick was in a lawsuit, but took a big demonstration, took a big stand against the NFL. He never played again. What is your anticipation for what happens with Brian Flores in this lawsuit?
A lot to unpack there. I don't think, first off, that there will be much that comes of it. I think that I really admire his courage. Like you said, he's putting his career on the line. I, like you, believe that he's probably coached his last game as a head coach in the NFL because of it. And my hope here is that there is some clarity about what he wants. I've heard some, some talk about certain things and transparency in the process. One thing I want to start off by saying here is I don't think you litigate your way into making owners do more diversity hiring. I don't think you create rules to make that happen. I think you have to create processes, and you have to recognize that you have to build a bigger pool, a deeper pool of candidates, and you've got to find more diversity within those NFL front offices. And so to me, it is encouraging that you've got 7 black general managers now, with 2 young guys getting hired this cycle, Ryan Poles in Chicago and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah in Minnesota. You only got 1 president of color in the NFL with the Washington Commanders. We'll start calling them that. And so for me, it's like you have to have more representation there in order to make this problem better, to improve it. And I think we focus so much on the hard numbers, about 70% black league, 1 coach, whatever. No coaches hired so far in this cycle. I think it was 1 last year in the coaching cycle. I just think if you spend that much time focusing on that part of the process or that part of the problem, you're never going to be happy. You've got to create a long-lasting process. You've got to make changes that really have teeth to them. And, be honest with you, I think we all know this. Once they start playing football games, this is going to go on the back burner and people are going to stop talking about it.
So, to be clear, you don't think it will have a positive effect?
I don't think it will, no.
Will it have a negative effect? Is it just no effect, or is it a negative effect?
I don't think it can have a negative effect. I don't think it can be worse than what it is already. And again, I understand where he's coming from. I know he's frustrated. I know he wants to create change. But just as with Colin Kaepernick, it's just not enough to say you want change. You have to really identify what that change looks like. And I'm realistic about this in 2 ways. One, I don't think you ever get rich, powerful people to do what you want by suing them. I think it's very hard to do. You're playing a game that they invented. They live in this world every day. So it's not going to make them uncomfortable to be sued or to have bad press. Secondly, you really have to identify what you consider to be success. I don't think you're ever going to have a space anywhere, let alone pro football, where you can say, well, the amount of people in the workforce needs to mirror the amount of people who are managing the workforce. That's just not realistic. And so if the league is 70% black, I don't think you have to have 70% of the league be black coaches. I think there are a lot of good coaches who get hired every year. Unfortunately, it's a numbers game. There are only 32 jobs out there. And I'm somebody who pushes hard for diversity, but I also believe you can't tell people who to hire.
I'm shaking my head at the comment, not your statement.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so ultimately, you can't tell people who to hire. You have to hope that they are hiring the best people for the job.
Petro trying to throw me off during a serious conversation.
I saw that.
Listen, if you're somebody called Eric the egghead, which I think is pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Smart guy. I think it's a good one. I just like to acknowledge all of our folks. If you're catching us via the podcast, we do stream live Thursday nights at 9 with
Egghead,
the podcast, and we've got the chat room so we can, people can, communicate with us, and so Eric just can't help but look at the chat board. And when I put the comments up, when I post them up there, it throws them off. So, I apologize. I thought,
Eric's easily distracted. Eric.
He is.
I thought Jeff's comment. Jeff, I think you're right. The issue is like the men that have the power, they were risen in football during a much different time, right? There were a lot of things that were more acceptable, publicly. When, let's say, somebody like when Jerry Jones first bought the Dallas Cowboys, there had not been an African-American head coach in the NFL at that point, right?
Yep.
You think about it, he bought the Cowboys in '89. Art Shell became the coach in the early '90s, right? I know Dennis Green was the second one in 1992. And so you think about that. Like we think about this, like the formative years of all these people happened, and for the most part, like the NFL ownership is like a coasting life position, right? Like for the most part, those guys haven't matured intellectually for 20, 30 years. And so like, I agree with you. It's hard to get in these guys' headspace. And like, you have to make systematic ground change that bubbles it up to the top, right? Because every single one of these things, there's this object in math called a Riemann surface, where like you zoom in on it and every little part of it looks normal, but then you zoom out and the whole thing's like all kind of screwed up, right? And I think of the coaching hires this way. Like you zoom in at any one coaching hire and you're like, oh, that makes sense. The guy, they interviewed a couple candidates of color. They hired somebody who's clearly qualified. There's nothing really bad about this. But then you like take a step back and you look and you're like, but this system ends up becoming something that is unacceptable. And so how do you end up doing that? How do you end up erasing that? And I think to the league's credit, and the league doesn't deserve a ton of credit, but to the league's credit, what you have seen over the last decade, let's say, are more women, more people of color in positions of like scouting and positions of assistant coaching. I mean, we had, 5 years ago, we had no women who were assistant coaches, for example, in the NFL. And now we have a couple, I think it's like somewhere around 5, right? And like, we had no women analytics people, and these are just the areas I know. And now there are, a couple dozen in the league. And same thing with coaches. And one of the reasons we have like, some of the nepotism we have in the league from the coaching standpoint is like those guys get the kind of crappy jobs at the beginning, can afford them, right? The league doesn't want to pay people at the very beginning. And the ones that can afford them are the ones that can sleep in daddy's basement. And then 10 years after it happens, we're like, oh, of course Belichick's son's qualified to be the DC. Yeah. He's been on this
right
team for 10 years.
But I think you're labeling the problem, which we've done a number of times. But what is the lawsuit doing? Right? Let's talk about what Brian Flores hopes to accomplish. Will he accomplish it? Is this guy, a lot of people think, many people have said it, that he's sacrificing his career for this, which, and I mentioned a couple of people that have done that before, Kurt Flood being one, Colin Kaepernick being another. This is not, I think it would be a monumental situation if he did get hired, right? And I think somebody said in the chat room, like, he's got an interview with the Texans. Is that right? Looking at one of my trackers here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, there he is. Was conducted second interview on January 31st. So if he gets hired, that is progress, right? Because the man is suing the league. Not all the progress we need, but I am interested in will it work? Because I think where it has a chance, I tend to agree with what Jeff says, that it's going to make a big stink. He's going to slug it out. Even if he wins, he's going to win money. And is it going to change the hearts and minds? And I think where it could is like Congress is taking notice, right? Like you don't want when you're a billionaire running a multi-billion-dollar corporation or part of an absolute, golden goose that not only lays the egg for you, but then gently lifts you up and sticks it under your own butt, right? Like that's how lucrative the NFL is. You don't need Congress, and you're clearly a monopoly. You don't need Congress snooping around what you're doing. And so I do think that's an area that could draw attention, that could make this bigger than, say, your random lawsuit, which every team has handled different lawsuits against them. I think there is the chance that this one has a little more legs. I think to Jeff's point, when the Super Bowl's played, isn't anybody going to be talking about it? And this is going to wage on for a long time. The question is it a Jerry Tarkanian type thing that went on for years and years and years with the NCAA and really changed nothing, and was just kind of the backdrop of who the man was, but really didn't affect change? Or is this something that is going to fundamentally change the way business is done?
To me, I think him coming forward and saying this could very well end my career, it was the one difference between him and Colin Kaepernick. Even though, I think Kaepernick, because the fact of the matter is the people that came, there was one player who supported Kaepernick in a very big way. And that was Eric Reed, who ended up also struggling to find work in the NFL. And it's hard to trace back and say, like there was a ton of awareness elicited by what Colin Kaepernick did, but there wasn't necessarily as much, like, I don't know if there was a ton of action that came from it, right? You can paint things in the end zone, you can put things on the helmet, and it's hard because we still, we're not better as a country than we were back then. I don't think you can make that claim. We have more awareness, and I think to a certain extent what these things do, and maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want this where, this idea that like we're so much better, this idea we made so much progress, which I think is true, but we overinflate the progress, right? If we don't point out the inequalities that are still there, then people can sort of like stay underneath the current and continue to act in nefarious ways without us saying anything, right? And whereas if you sort of, again, somebody like Brian Flores has the courage to sort of talk this stuff out and like explain away everything that's happened to him, then people have to choose a side. And I do think that that's an important part of this. And in the process of choosing sides, it divides us at first. But I'd rather be divided and have the truth be out there than coalescing around something that's fake.
Jeff, you got a rebuttal?
Well, what I was going to make, and I was reading some of the comments, it's as I've thought about this, again, I go back to the question of how do you measure progress? And, and going back specifically to the question you asked about the suit in itself, what worries me about the suit is that if it's a suit about discrimination, I would prefer that every example he gives is about discrimination. Okay. And so he gave one example of potential discrimination. He gave one example of taking a leap in judgment about John Elway's physical state or what he'd been doing the night before. And then he gave a third example about potential tampering with Tom Brady and potentially tanking games. And so you've got three different things going on here that in some ways mute the argument he's trying to create. That's the most important one, which is minority hiring. And so that's my first concern with the suit is that it's a shotgun approach to this. Now, what's that?
Well, I was going to say it to me, listen, and I'm no attorney, right? It to me, but having seen some lawsuits play out in sports and different things in life, it is an approach of the other points about tanking, John Elway being drunk, are to me it is what I think will come from John Gruden, right? In his
character,
and it's pain points.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be painful. You want to fight this fight? Here's what I'm going to bring out. I'm going to bring all these things out, and we're going to air a lot of dirty laundry. It to me is something you do when your ultimate goal is to settle,
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, let me make this as painful as possible, as I possibly can, so that you have all the incentive to settle a lawsuit with me. And so to me, it's the kind of thing you do. And it doesn't mean that you're not deserving of it, right?
Yeah.
Like deserving of a large settlement, a huge cash amount. It just means that that's the approach. Is I want you to know you're going to come out of this bloodied. Even if I don't win this thing, you're going to be bloodied up and down. And it does kind of give you the idea that maybe they don't think their case is that strong on what is the focus. And this is just more about embarrassing the NFL
exactly
and giving them a black eye and shaming them publicly, right?
That tactic is the one that I question only, and not because I don't believe the merits of the lawsuit. It's more that the NFL is incapable of embarrassment. Yeah. Like, they've been embarrassed for decades over and over and over. And like, football is a wonderful sport, so people still come back and watch it. And it's an escape for a lot of people. And that to me is the one place where I think this might fall short, because embarrassing the league is, part
it's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible. And so that's what I was going to say, is that it draws away from the most important aspect of the suit, which is I want to help minority coaching hires become an easier process in this league. And so, again, it's a tricky thing, and it's a big problem, right? I think we can all agree it's a big problem. I think, in a weird way, I think this suit would have more merit if it's Eric Bieniemy sitting there and not Brian Flores, a guy who hasn't gotten a head coaching job, a guy who didn't work for an owner who has a black general manager, a black VP of communications, and runs an organization called Rise that tries to promote diversity hiring, and create better opportunities for minorities. I mean, it's just, I hope he's ready for the fight.
Yeah. And isn't this, though, that we've talked about, that Eric Bieniemy is he's the tip of the spear, but an unwilling tip of the spear, right? Like, that's not the fight he wants. He wants to be a head football coach. He's never been willing. He really shuts down any conversation about it immediately. I think because he feels that that's the best way to get hired, where Brian Flores clearly is one that's like, I will stand here and I will fight the fight. I mean, it may be the kind of thing he's looked around and been, there are other guys that would be better in this role, but I'm the only one who's willing to do it, so I will do it. I mean, I think that's one of the aspects that's there. What does the accusation of tanking do, right? Like, is there – I get it if the NFL's got big problems and their owner's going to be in trouble. If they can prove that they tanked a game, an individual game on purpose, right? Jacking with the betting lines, you don't do it, right? And that's going to get you in big, big trouble. We know that. The concept of just trading away Laramie Tunsil for picks and trading away good players.
Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, those things, those are just decisions about your future. We consider the assets we get in return, the cap room, better for our team in the long haul. We're making a long haul play for a short term. Is there anything that comes of that? Is that maybe a poison pill that Eric will ultimately be the bigger problem and maybe cost Ross his franchise?
Yeah, I think so. Here's the thing I'll say. The NFL is embracing gambling. You just see the Steve Mariucci commercial where he's like, track your bets, have a certain bet size, make sure that you control yourself. But at the same time, legalized gambling is having gambling out in the open prevents a lot of the point shaving and all that stuff, because back when sports betting was offshore and illegal everywhere but Nevada, it was easier to for all this shady stuff to happen. So I think what's going to end up happening is if they can prove that the Dolphins were tanking a game, and it's a little bit different because they weren't tanking a game. Like, it's not like Ross was betting on the game and telling Flores to tank it. But at the same time, it probably is a pretty good way for the league to sort of make an example of an owner who's done something poorly here, because essentially what they're trying to do is say, look, we're going to take gambling seriously as a way to popularize the sport. People who gamble watch 3 times as many games in a season than people who don't gamble. It's like 48 versus 14. But at the same time, like, they're going to have to they have to square it with giving real consequences to somebody who's messing up the integrity of the game.
Yeah, Jeff, is this really the one that's ultimately going to be the thing that is the ends up affecting more change because it may will cost him first franchise?
It's the one that will dominate the headlines for sure. Of all the things that he said, that's the one that caught my eye the most, and one that's caught probably everybody's eyes. I see there's a comment in here from CNL Sooner that talks about just the game fixing aspect of this. And I don't know, I don't know all the nuances of the law when it comes to that part of it. But yeah, as Eric mentioned, when you are involved with gambling, Stephen Ross is a partner in DraftKings, so that speaks to all kinds of crazy. Now, do I think he had the intentions of benefiting from it beyond getting a better draft pick? I don't think that was the case, but a lot of people break laws in this country who don't do it intentionally and still wind up in a big mess. And so that's where it does become something where, the federal government can start looking into it. The league certainly is going to have a problem with it. I'm curious to see what kind of evidence Brian Flores has to prove that this did in fact happen. But if it was happening, it's very alarming. And in a way that goes beyond just we've all talked about teams in other sport tanking to get better draft picks. Philadelphia 76ers did it for years in order to become a playoff team. But the NFL is held to a higher standard. And so anything that seems like it's not above board is going to create a lot of controversy.
Yeah, no doubt. It's something we're going to be watching for quite some time, to say the very least. Let's move forward to a couple of coaches, and this will take us down the head coaching road as well. By the way, Doug Peterson, it's coming out now as we're recording this, being hired as the Jacksonville Jaguars head coach. So there's another spot that gets filled along the way. Let's talk, though, because the two quarterbacks, maybe Joe Burrow is going to wedge in and be the third. If you look at his statistics, I know he's playing for the Super Bowl, but he has not put together the kind of MVP campaigns yet that both Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes have had. But Josh Allen is going to lose his offensive coordinator, has lost his offensive coordinator. Patrick Mahomes is losing his quarterback coach. What does this do here, Eric, for the two quarterbacks? I mean, is this a bigger deal than people realize? Head coaches are in place, but these are guys. I know Mike Kafka's been given a lot of credit for the development of and Patrick Mahomes, and same thing with Dable for Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard part with Daniel Jones is that he's kind of in that very end of his rookie year deal thing, right? And we talk, No,
I'm talking about Mahomes and Allen. What does it do to them?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I don't know the inner workings of the cheat, like sort of like how it's Reed, Kafka, and but I do think that with Josh Allen, Dable was amazing. Dable did a lot of things. He pushed a lot of easy buttons. Allen feels like one of those quarterbacks, and when we watch him, he seems somewhat impervious to a lot of the issues, right? Like he's big physically, has a cannon of an arm, but like we forget that in 2018 and 2019, he just wasn't a good player. And even this year, he regressed a little bit. We all talked about that, and obviously Chiefs fans don't really want to hear about it because the guy was slinging the ball at Arrowhead. But like it'll be interesting because the Buffalo Bills are paying Josh Allen to be worth $45 million every single year. And it's a question as to whether or not he can continue that. With Mahomes, I mean, look, we've already seen this was Mahomes' worst year. So this is going to be some sort of turning point for his career. It's either going to exacerbate things that were already going on poorly, or it's going to turn it around for him. I can't imagine everything we know about Mahomes. He's going to play worse next year after what happened Sunday and what happened the whole season. But Mike Kafka is getting a lot of credit. And if he's gone, we're going to have variables that are changing. And if Bieniemy's gone too, like it'll be an interesting thing for him. I do think Peterson in Jacksonville and Kafka in New York are going to help, the two young guys that need it, I think, dearly.
Yep. For me, it's people forget what Josh McDaniels meant to Tom Brady's career after Charlie Weiss left town. And he really allowed Tom Brady to go to a different level as a quarterback. I think that sometimes when you're at the place in your career that Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes both are, that it doesn't hurt to have somebody come in with a different idea about how to utilize you, that could look at your strengths and weaknesses objectively and not feel – there's always a certain sense of bias when you start off with somebody. And I think both those guys have to understand that they weren't going to go through their entire career with the same offensive coordinator, the same quarterback coach. You have the kind of success you have in those franchises, you're going to have a lot of different people coming in. But I would, on the positive side, say it could be like a Josh McDaniels, Tom Brady situation. On the flip side, I remember Ken Wisenhunt coaching Ben Roethlisberger and really struggling with him. At certain points of his career, it was very stifling for Ben. And then Bruce Arians showed up and things changed. But that was a rough go. And Todd Haley had some tough moments with Ben Roethlisberger as well. So a lot depends on who they hire. I would guess, obviously, the Bills are going to go with Ken Dorsey as the OC, and they hired Joe Brady. So I'm guessing that. And they were very open about the fact that they wanted Josh Allen to have a say in that. And I would assume that Patrick Mahomes will have a similar say in who's coaching him at quarterback. It'd be the smart play.
Yeah, and if Eric Bieniemy, who's reportedly got interviews with the New Orleans Saints, if he goes, listen, Matt Nagy's going to land somewhere, isn't he? Between the Jaguars now with Doug Peterson and the Chiefs having openings. I mean, Matt Nagy now knows he won't be unemployed. That's one thing, because he's got all kinds of connections that are there. And not to say that somebody else might not want him outside of the Andy Reid tree, but I do think it's going to be interesting. Which one of the jobs, whether it's Matt Eberflus in Chicago, Brian Dable with the Giants, Josh McDaniels with the Raiders, Nathaniel Hackett with Denver. Stay tuned. Let's see if Aaron Rodgers makes his way to Denver on that one. Kevin O'Connell apparently headed to Minnesota. Now Doug Peterson to Jacksonville. Who are you putting your money on to be the most successful, Eric?
It's a great question. I mean, I think some of the good coaches are still left. Like, when you think of like Leftwich, obviously, we like Bieniemy in Kansas City. Bowles is there as well. I was I'm not a bit. Yeah, Leftwich apparently pulled out of the Jags job because he didn't want to have Trent Baalke as the general manager. And you look at the history of Trent Baalke.
Smart move.
Yeah. That I think there's that. I think he also probably started reading the tea leaves that I'm not getting this job.
Well, and here's the other thing: he might take Bruce Arians' job.
Yeah.
If Brady retires, Bruce Arians retired in Arizona because he was, getting sick and not, and he came back. He looks a lot lighter actually than when he was in Arizona. So maybe he might turn around or whatever. But to answer your question, I mean, it's really tough. I mean, I actually think Minnesota has a pretty good chance to be okay. And that's my obviously analytics mindset. Like I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but I also think the big thing for me was they looked at Harbaugh and said, no, we don't want Harbaugh. They were not having Harbaugh be the head coach there would have looked a bit desperate. And I think they're not that good right now, and they have a ways to go. But I think Adofo-Mensah hiring Harbaugh and having Harbaugh have a longer contract than him, that was going to happen. And Harbaugh wanting to turn that thing into the 2011 Niners right away when that's not really feasible. Adofo-Mensah having, I think, the sense to say, no, this is a little bit longer of a rebuild, and hiring somebody for all I know, which, he might end up hiring my former colleague, Zach Robinson, to be the offensive coordinator. So that would be like the PFF dream in Minnesota, I guess. But that's the one I'm going to buy into almost out of default. Like I'm not, it's not like I think that's a 10 out of 10 hire. It's just that the other hires I've kind of been like, most of the time.
Yeah. Jeff, where do you go?
I was Broncos. Maybe you're about to say that, but I look at what Aaron and Terry have both said on this in the comments here, and they're right. I think the Broncos is easily the best opportunity for a coach to succeed, just because, one, they've got a lot of talent on the roster. They got a lot of cap space. I think George Payton is a smart GM. They position themselves to have a quarterback, even if it's not Aaron Rodgers. they can be in play for Deshaun Watson. In worst case, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, all three of those guys would be an upgrade over what they've had to give that team a chance to compete in a really difficult division. And so, to me, and Nathaniel Hackett's had a chance to be around Matt LaFleur. He was obviously did a successful job coaching Blake Bortles and an offense in Jacksonville. They got to the AFC Championship game back in whatever it was, 2018, 2017, 2017, 2018.
2018 January.
17. Yeah. So I think he's got obviously coaching pedigree with his dad having been a coach. So for me, he's seen a lot of different things, had a lot of opportunities to be in winning franchises, and they get Aaron Rodgers. He'll do pretty well for himself.
Yeah, I will say this. I agree with what Matt says here. I think Dable has the hardest job despite the division. He's forced to use Daniel Jones. I don't see how he will succeed. I don't either. And everybody always goes, and I had this conversation with Bob Glauber on the radio show today, and he's like, well, if it doesn't work, you get a year to try him, then you go draft a guy. Yeah, you just draft a guy, like Cleveland did, like the Giants did once before, and it worked out. Like that whole you just go draft a guy, and then that guy's on you. Right. And to me, I think it is kind of an interesting move by Mike Kafka to go there. Right. If he can turn Daniel Jones around, then he'll be a head coach in 1 year. Mm-hmm. Right. 1 year from today, Mike Kafka will be a head coach in the NFL. If he turns Daniel Jones into 28 touchdowns and 5, or even just 20, a good Alex Smith, 26-6, and they go 11-6.
The Alex Smith special.
He's a head coach. But I doubt that happens. I don't think it will happen. I think the Broncos, Matt Eberflus, getting the cap room that he's got, the roster he's already got, and
the Bears,
Nathaniel Hackett, excuse me.
Okay.
Nathaniel Hackett getting the roster he's got in Denver, the roster he's got, the cap room he's got, and the assumption that a better veteran quarterback is coming, that they're going to make a play for Russell Wilson, or we know they're the leading contender, obviously, for Aaron Rodgers, something like that. If Tampa doesn't jump into the middle of that, I would think Tampa would be all over the Rodgers move as well. But, they don't have the same kind of cap room that the Broncos do that can fit that in and go after Devontae Adams and make it a nice landing place. But I will say this. I think the Jacksonville job is getting way underrated. I think Trevor Lawrence is a very good talent. I know you don't like the GM situation if you're going in there. I don't think anybody's thrilled about Trent
or
Baalke.
the ownership.
They ran him out of the Bay Area, but
the two teams ahead of them.
Well, but I mean,
you have the number 1 overall pick. You can take Evan Neal or Kayvon Thibodeau. Or here's the thing: if things work, Chenault, who's the Etienne and Lawrence are their big three on offense. They're all on rookie deals. Like if that thing hits, it's going to be like Cincinnati, right? The problem is you need like some luck that the guy's a baller like Burrow is, and like that's. Well, but you're right. I actually didn't mind the Jaguars this year because the bad division, right? The division has quarterbacks. What? Davis Mills, Carson Wentz, Ryan Tannehill. So you can get out from under that pretty easy. The problem is, again, like the thing, and this is why I struggle with the Giants too. When ownership has consistently not provided competence, it's really, really, really hard to be competitive. And it's not impossible, but it's pretty hard.
I think Doug Peterson is in that position because Doug Peterson is somewhat damaged goods, leaving Philadelphia. And so he's a guy that's like, listen, give me the GM. You get the players. I'll coach the guys. If it's not working, we'll chat, right? And we'll talk. And I think Doug Peterson's looking at it going, I'll come in here. I'll win some games. I'll turn some heads. I'll develop Trevor Lawrence. And when I do that, then I've got some swag, and I'll ditch this guy, and I'll get my own personnel guy. I mean, that's written all over the wall, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, that's a heck of a play for Doug Peterson to make. I don't see his personality being – that's more of an Andy Reid type move. But maybe he's learned a few things. That'd be a heck of a move for Doug Peterson to make. But
if he comes in there and wins 11 games and Trevor Lawrence throws 30 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, Doug Peterson's the king of the town.
Yeah, but that ain't happening. He ain't winning 11 games with that team. I see the potential in Jacksonville. I just feel like you've got two franchises ahead of them that are better run and are better coached right now. And so we can talk about quarterbacks, but I think you'd have a hard time telling anybody that Mike Vrabel and Frank Reich are going to end up sitting behind Jacksonville anytime soon.
Okay, well, here's what I will tell you. The Tennessee Titans are $6.7 million over the cap. The Indianapolis Colts are –
And Tannehill's $57 million dead money if they cut him this year.
Yeah, and the Colts are $38 million under the cap, so they're in a much better position. The Texans are only $20 million under the cap. Meanwhile, the Jacksonville Jaguars are $57 million under the cap, and they will pick first in every round.
Okay, they got to get the players right.
They do.
I've seen this act before.
Yeah, but that's true of everybody, right? Yeah. Like if the quarterback's right, then you don't have to get the players as right.
I'm not ready to see that Trevor Lawrence is the second coming of Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow. I think he's got to do a little bit more for me to get on that train.
The Colts, by the way, they had that cap space, but they did give up a first-round pick for Carson Wentz.
They did, and I think that Carson Wentz can only take him so far. What do you think of Doug Peterson, the coach? He's gotten the job over Byron Leftwich, who to me is maybe an even more complete candidate than Eric Bieniemy from the standpoint that he hasn't been passed over a bunch of times, and he just worked with Tom Brady, which I would think he soaked up a lot.
And he played in Jacksonville.
I mean, and maybe that's it. They don't want to fire one of their own. I mean, I've talked about that, with in this town that everyone always wants to hire the star. I'm like, yeah, why do you have to fire him? It sucks, right? And so, but like is Doug Peterson? I mean, this. We all knew he was being interviewed immediately, but is this really a better choice than Byron Leftwich?
Well, he got a ring on his finger, so that makes you a better choice than a lot of people. And I give Doug Peterson to me is a lot like Zach Taylor. When I watch Zach Taylor coach, he has sort of a how did I get here kind of vibe to him. I'm not trying to soak up all the oxygen in the room. I don't have all the answers for everybody. I kind of know how to. I'm one of the guys. And that's Doug Peterson's strength is this everyman quality he brings to the table. And it's charming in a way. For me, I've seen a lot of head coaches. He's not going to John Gruden you and walk in and be all tough and over personality you. But I think he's able to win games that way. I think in Philadelphia, after they had their nice run, they had a wave of injuries they couldn't overcome. They had a lot of dysfunction. The quarterback went south. But I don't think he gets enough credit for that championship he won because he beat the best coach in the NFL history on a neutral field and the best quarterback in NFL history.
And he was ballsy trading up and taking Wentz and then trading Sam Bradford to the Vikings instead of taking – a first year just to get on the green with Bradford. He had the sort of the fourth down, decision making in the Super Bowl where not only he had the Philly special,
but you took Minnesota. Yet you said that's where the success was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I like Doug Peterson just to say I like Matt Eberflus. I also think the Bears are a mess. Like the environment matters, right? Like I actually I mean, look, the Jaguars have had one season with more than 6 wins in the last 10 years or more. I think it's more than that. Like, I don't know. I need to see a little bit more. Whereas I think like Vikings ownership is fine. I think like there's a number of reasons why I think O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah will be fine.
Well, I will say this: if Aaron Rodgers leaves, Kirk Cousins, dare we say it, Eric, is the best quarterback in the division?
Yeah, just like my grandfather once told a story about how he got a B and he asked the teacher why, and he said, "You're the best of a mediocre bunch."
That's the best we can get out of Eric tonight.
Yeah,
as far as complimenting Kirk Cousins,
right? But like,
I don't think Cousins is bad, but like you can't win with him. Not anything meaningful.
They might win with him if Aaron Rodgers leaves.
Yeah.
The easiest way to win a Super Bowl is by winning your division and getting home playoff games. And
True.
That looks like a pretty easy path to get there and get it done. All right.
Why are we sleeping on Detroit?
Well,
why?
Yeah, because it's Detroit. I don't think it's sleeping on. It's being realistic.
Are you make joke there, or are you actually wanting to have a rational conversation about Detroit?
Detroit has gobs and gobs of draft capital. They have a GM who appears to have a clue. They have a head coach who players will run through a brick wall for. They have
and who will run into a brick wall himself.
Okay, but like I actually think Detroit. If a few things go right, Detroit's the team to beat in that division in the next 18 months.
You mean if like the Vikings, the Bears, and the Packers stop playing football?
Well,
is that what we're talking about?
I should have known before throwing the Lions smoke at Jeff.
That's right.
That was But like that's the team that we're going to turn around pretty quick. Like that is the Bengals of the NFC is the Detroit Lions. Goff is Andy Dalton. Like it's. And the roster is pretty bare, but they have a clue.
I don't see it.
I don't see whatever that guy's name, Anon St. Brown being Jamar Chase and Jared Goff being Joe Burrow. But
no,
maybe I'm not wearing glasses either.
So.
What's that?
Ramon St. Brown is Tyler Boyd, right? Like.
Then they better find their Jamar Chase.
You know who the most – I didn't realize this the other day. You know who the most expensive player on the Bengals is?
Is it Hendrickson?
No.
Joe Mixon?
Are you talking about total dollars?
Cap number this year.
Cap number this year?
Von Bell?
Trey Waynes.
Oh, okay.
It's like their fourth corner. The thing is like you can build a roster and you don't even have to be perfect. When you throw numbers at the problem. Obviously, the biggest thing for the Bengals is they got a quarterback. But like the Lions, they have enough ammo to get a quarterback, right? And like they have enough. To me, they got to figure out who's going to call plays for them because Anthony Lynn wasn't great, and then Dan Campbell took that over. But the Bears, they have Justin Fields and no one else. That roster is empty. And they don't have the capital. They had to. They just got back from having first-round picks from not Von Miller, but Khalil Mack, and they traded one to get Fields. They don't have a first-round pick this year. The Vikings roster is terrible, and the Packers, they're going to start Jordan Love. So, why not them?
Yeah, because it's the Lions. I mean, that's one reason to start.
The Bengals hadn't won a playoff game since 1990 either, and I don't know. I'm trying to convince.
Is there a number one pick quarterback and a top 5 pick wide receiver? No, I mean there's a lot of differences there, Eric. I mean you're painting the Lions as the Bengals, and I will agree with you if it's 2 years ago's Bengals, but I don't see the Joe Burrow that they're going to select this year. And
I'm asking you guys this quick question:
Yeah,
are the Bengals this year? The Ravens don't have 25 guys get hurt. And Baker Mayfield flames out with the Browns? Are we even talking about them?
Possibly. You'll recall I liked the Bengals to make the playoffs before the season started. So I liked me some Bengals action there, and even had them as a Super Bowl pick before or to bet because of the numbers. Didn't bet them, I will tell you, but said, hey, this would be a good one to take a flyer on. Are they? Maybe not. Maybe they don't. Maybe that road becomes too difficult to get there. But I don't think they're going anywhere.
No, not. I'm just saying that I think there was some good timing in there too that allowed them to become who they are.
I mean, we've talked about that with the Kansas City Chiefs in 2019. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo was waiting for them in the Super Bowl, not Aaron Rodgers, not Tom Brady. I mean, I think the timing is a little bit of everything. I think the key is to get there year after year after year after year, and eventually the timing breaks right for you, right? Like that's the whole game plan. The idea that's what makes the Rams to me so dangerous this year to a lot of other NFL teams. It's because if the Rams win, there's going to be a lot of other teams that go, that's how you do it. And they're going to come up short, and then they're going to devastate their franchise for years to come. If the Rams win a championship, they'll piss and moan if they crash down hard in the next few years. Right? No doubt, like every fan base does immediately. Kansas City won a Super Bowl 2 years ago and played 4 straight conference championships, and I've taken a week of phone calls with pissed off people. Right? So, I mean, I get it. I understand how it works. But flags fly forever, and the trophy will be there. But what I think it's going to do if they win is it's going to push a lot of people to go do things the way the Rams do it. And I think the Eagles tried it twice. Once at the end of the Andy Reid regime, and it crushed what had been a successful coach and sent him packing. They did it again with Doug Peterson, and they cashed because there were a lot of like, let's go trade for this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And then all of a sudden you looked around and the roster sucked and they bombed out. And, I do think that's something that is something to watch if we're going to get copycats of something that is a very risky way to go about building a team. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right,
but
Tom Brady.
There's going to have to be teams, and it's going to be the teams that take advantage of that. And like again, when I talk about Detroit, that's what I'm talking about. A team where they're understanding that you're on the other side of a team going all in can be advantageous, right? And I think that's where I kind of liked what Detroit did last year, where Brad Holmes said, "Look, Matthew Stafford was at a different phase of his career than we were as a franchise, so he had different utility to the Rams than he did." There's aspects of that, and I agree. If this continues to happen, then there's going to be opportunities for teams to be on the other side of those gambles.
Yeah, no doubt. Tom Brady calling it quits. Jeff, who takes his place as kind of the king of the league? Is it Patrick Mahomes, or is his struggles? Does his, frankly, a lot of the social media stuff that goes on around him with family and friends, is that, create a problem for him? Who's the new Tom Brady now?
Well, Mahomes is the best option in that conversation, but I imagine over the next 2-3 years, you're like Josh Allen and Joe Burrow will be part of that, and Justin Herbert, and maybe even Kyler Murray. It depends on if Cliff Kingsbury can coach a team past the midseason point. but there'll be a lot of people in that conversation. And while Tom Brady at the finish line is unparalleled, let's not forget that he spent most of his career battling with Peyton Manning and Ben Roethlisberger and Aaron Rodgers. And so there were Drew Brees, Russell Wilson. There were a lot of quarterbacks he had to deal with during his career. And he lost, 2 Super Bowls to the worst of the bunch, to that bunch, Eli Manning. And so I put him in a whole different category. And this is like when Michael Jordan left the NBA. The things he's done in his career, we talked about Mahomes the last couple of years, whether he could catch him in Super Bowl wins or end up being the greatest. Nobody's catching this guy. The records are too far out of reach. You got to play too long. You got to have the good fortune of staying healthy. I think when I wrote a column about Brady retiring, I said if at this stage, Mahomes would have to throw for 4,300 yards a year and 33 touchdowns a year for the next 15 years just to match what he's done. So that's playing until he's 41, which I think most quarterbacks aren't going to do that. You look at where Ben Roethlisberger's at when he left the game. You look at where Peyton Manning, how he looked when he left the game. Those guys didn't get to 40. And so the genius, the beauty, the brilliance of Tom Brady is just longevity. He's just played long enough and put those records in such a stratosphere that anybody who comes along next to him is going to pale in comparison.
Eric, no quarterback in the NFL today that's active since Brady and Roethlisberger are gone has won more than one Super Bowl. So everybody's got a long way to go to even get to within spitting distance as far as the Super Bowl accomplishments. Jeff just laid out the statistical accomplishments. Who is it, though, that takes over as the face of the league, and does anybody have a chance to run him down or at least get into the category of a discussion, right? I mean, Jeff's right. The overwhelming evidence is that no one in the league right now is going to come close to him, that it will probably be decades before we get to somebody, although 4 by Joe Montana, 4 by Bradshaw, 4 by Montana, 70s, 80s, and then we had Tom Brady.
Aikman.
Yeah. Yes. Nobody handed off like Aikman.
Yeah. All pre-salary cap too, right?
That's right. So
so Aikman and the Cowboys was after 6 playoff teams, but Bradshaw and Montana were 5 playoff teams.
What do you mean?
The tournament was
how many
5
teams in the playoffs?
Oh, how many were in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Well, listen, and I'll make you a case that the salary cap actually makes it easier because most people are dunces and don't know how to deal with it, right?
Yeah. There's not a ton of evidence that the salary cap has created more parity, especially with But yeah, the face of the league is in my opinion is going to be sort of whomever comes out of the next couple of years with the AFC titles between Burrow, Mahomes, Herbert. I'm thinking of I mean those guys, Josh Allen. I think it's Mahomes, but I also think the shine is a little bit off of Mahomes, especially how this season has gone. And I think if Joe Burrow goes into LA, becomes the first team to ever win a road Super Bowl with the Cincinnati Bengals team, after being the first overall pick in the draft, after being a Heisman Trophy winner, like I think he can make a case for it.
Yeah, I listen. I think Mahomes is the statistics. I've done some breakdowns, and if you want to look at the first 5 years, Mahomes has more yards, touchdowns, everything than Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady this many years into their careers. He has one less Super Bowl. He has one more win, but one less Super Bowl than Ben Roethlisberger, 2 less Super Bowl championships than Tom Brady. But statistically speaking, he's blowing people away, right, where they're at. And if you compare him to Josh Allen, what he's done his first couple of years compared to Josh Allen, even Joe Burrow's numbers are tiny. They're tiny little numbers compared to what Patrick Mahomes was piling up. So listen, if they turn around, if the Bengals, and I think Eric said when he was here in town, you definitely will bet against the Bengals winning that division next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case and they don't win the division, because Mahomes got it up and running and he's been off and running, won the division year after year after year. And so
they were winning before he got here too, though.
They were. Yeah, absolutely.
So he's got them to a nice situation.
It is. But I mean, I think it comes down to, like, I think it speaks to is Zach Taylor, Andy Reid. Who's your money on there?
Well, I mean, yeah. But Andy Reid has, how much longer does Andy Reid have, Petro?
I'm with you. And personnel-wise, I mean, where are you at? Right? Like, I mean, there are big questions. I think Mahomes is the superior quarterback, but I will say this. What's going to be interesting and what may determine the correct answer to this question is which quarterback doesn't hold his team hostage. Like, we touched on this, I think, last week on this podcast about Aaron Rodgers, and that you sell your soul to these quarterbacks. And when Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to run your plays in the first quarter, like, this is something that Tim Grunhard told the story about Mike McCarthy saying, look, we have stuff set up to run in the first and second quarter so that it sets up what we want to do in the third and fourth quarter. But Aaron Rodgers will go out there and he'll audible out of it. So we don't set up the stuff and we never get to the things we wanted to get to in the third and fourth quarter. If that's going on, or if you have a quarterback that says, I want every shiny toy out there, regardless of what it does to the cap, and you can never put together defense or you can never put together an offensive line, I think that's part of the magic of Tom Brady that people don't understand is, first of all, he got paid more than people realize. He was always restructuring his deals, so he never had the top cap number, but he was always taking cash payments to get it done. And if you look at the total money pocketed, it's really not any different than Peyton Manning. But he was smarter. He understood the cap game. And he didn't have to have the highest contract. He didn't have to wow people with that. But he also understood the team building aspect of things. That's why he ended up in Tampa. He understood that that was a great situation and that he would finish it off. What may be the thing here moving forward is which guy understands all the things that need to go on around you and will allow that to happen and not get into a pissing match and run off a coach or coordinator, or start telling the GM, you got to take this guy when somebody else would be better. I mean, I think that might be what ends up determining it is who understands football and team building, that part of football, better than the rest. That's probably the guy that's going to emerge, isn't it?
Well, the crazy thing that all those guys that you just named on the AFC side are cut from the same cloth. I mean, Joe Burrow was a lightly recruited guy. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes wasn't somebody who walked out as like God's greatest gift ever to football. Josh Allen was not heavily recruited. And Justin Herbert, it just seems like he's just wired differently. I mean, they all come across as people who are not as consumed with, hey, I need to be a rock star. Give me all the money. I'm the guy. They don't have that Aaron Rodgers element that you're talking about. I think they all understand that we win as a team, that the more people around me who are happy and succeeding, the better I do. And so it's a pretty even battle right there. That's what makes it fun, because you do have a group of guys who seem to care only about winning games and have shown that when their backs are up against the wall, all four of those guys are just named. And I'll include Lamar Jackson in that, a different kind of quarterback, and you can debate his passing skills, but he carried the Ravens for most of this season. And so when I see that in quarterbacks, that to me is the most telling quality of a quarterback. What do they do when things aren't going well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jimmy Garoppolo, speaking of quarterbacks, gracefully exited San Francisco. Where does he land, Eric? What's his future look like? No matter not just where he lands, but what does the rest of Jimmy Garoppolo's career look like?
I don't know, man. I think he's a high quality backup at this point. Like, you look at the availability in the league right now. It's, you think about it. It's. Would you rather have Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo?
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Garoppolo wins.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I would say that that's like the bar, right? So every other quarterback, Wilson, Rodgers, Cousins, even Carr, if he doesn't come back, Mariota, Tannehill, should he move? Like, Rodgers bought a house in Nashville. Maybe that's just because he wants to be next to Clay Travis and Joe Rogan or whatever. But like, he might be there. There's a ton of quarterbacks in this league that are moving that are better than he is. And you play the musical chairs, and I feel like he's the most likely one to not get the seat at the end.
Okay. He's the odds-on favorite, at least one betting board I saw, to be the Tampa Bay Bucks starting quarterback next year. That's not a bad spot to land, and it makes sense because they have, they don't probably may not have the money to be able to fit in an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson. And so if you would land in that situation, that's not a bad spot. But I also think there's the big picture of like, is he just a guy he's, I think you can make a case that he's very much got an Alex Smith-like career. You're going to covet him when you have nothing, and you're going to want better when you have him, right? Like I described this about the Royals had an outfielder, David DeJesus, and not a lot of pop, but could hit for average, could get on base, play a decent left field, could play center field. And I said, if you're sitting there with I said, this is a guy who's going to have a lot of jerseys in his basement when he's done. Somebody asked me, they're all excited about him. I said, look, he's going to play you fine. He's going to be, when you're a team, a championship caliber team, and you're like, we're one bat away. You get him, now now you've got a good bat. But as soon as you got him, you go, we got to be able to get better than this, don't we? Can't we get somebody who hits the ball over the wall? Like Jimmy Garoppolo, when you're sitting there, watching guys putz around and throw the ball to the other team and take sack after sack after sack, you're like, that looks pretty good to me.
Looks like Jimmy G.
Yeah. And then you go, God, man, like we needed to make a big play and he couldn't make it, right? Like that's what his career will be. He's Mr. Right now, not Mr. Right.
How does he compare to Eli Manning?
Oh man, dude, Eli Manning was absolute nails at his very peak.
I wouldn't go that far.
Not as aggressive.
2011 version of Eli Manning was if you bottle that up and make it a 10-year career, that's a first ballot Hall of Famer. The whole season. That Giants team was horrendous. And that like Eli, and again, Eli's whole career, right? But like the 2011 season, he carried a bad Giants team to the Super Bowl and won. Like he was worth 4 wins above replacement that year. Like he was in like again in the rest of his career trash for the most part. But Eli Manning's peak was really good, really good.
I think we forget how small of a sample size is Jimmy Garoppolo. He's only played like 5 full seasons as a starter, right?
Not even
that, right? Is it 4?
47 games started. He's 33-14. That's not even 3 full seasons as a starter.
Yeah. I think Kyle Shanahan said it best when he's been healthy. He went to the Super Bowl. He went to the NFC title game.
Yeah. I mean, I think the comp is closer to Alex Smith than it is Eli Manning. I think Eli Manning is a guy that grip it and rip it, let it fly, and he'd throw you out of a game and throw you into it. And you caught him when he was hot and some other things went right. That's a great time to have Eli Manning. But Eli Manning killed the Giants with a lot of throws as well. And I think Garoppolo is more likely to just take it and eat it. All right.
Eli Manning went into, I guess, so did Jimmy G. But Eli Manning went into Lambeau and beat Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
But I mean, Jimmy G did. Jimmy G didn't beat Aaron Rodgers. That was Eli in the games at Lambeau was putting up like 303, right? Like that.
He outplayed Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and he had that upside.
His throw to Manningham, he had a throw to Manningham in the NFC title game against that Niners defense.
Oh, yeah.
And he had to throw to Manningham to get him out of being backed up for the game-winning touchdown drive. The two of the best throws I've ever seen.
Eli could also kill you.
Of course, I mean, Eli threw pick sixes every single game he played the Vikings when I grew up there. Every single game. Darren Sharper had like 5 pick sixes on Eli Manning in his career. But
he was a little bit like Brett Favre without the arm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that's a little bit where he was. All right, let's finish with this. The Commanders. Washington has a football team. It has a name. Jeff, Commanders. Do you like it?
No, but what they were working with was not all that much better. So I'll live with it. It'll probably grow on me. I remember what was it? The Washington Generals back in USFL?
Well, it was the New Jersey Generals. Washington Generals would have worked, but because it was Donald Trump's team, nobody was going to take that name.
Wasn't there a USFL team in Washington? Am I wrong?
The Washington Federals.
Federals, that's what it was.
By the way, you're talking to the authority of USFL football, so you want to know.
As somebody,
Washington Federals was Craig James.
There you go.
Backfield. So
somebody who's scooping up their winnings with the East-West Shrine game. Petro, I expect you to have a USFL betting segment on the program this spring as the foremost.
I will. I love the USFL. Now, I don't know how much this is going to be like. I know they're taking all the names and towns and everything, and I'm excited about it. But I'll believe a league will succeed. That was actually USFL was actually good football.
I think we asked this question of you, like why didn't Kansas City have a USFL team?
Market wasn't big enough to try to split the fan base, and they went to Oklahoma City instead.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the major
Jim
reasons.
Kelly squad.
No, Jim Kelly was in Houston.
No, Doug Williams was in Oklahoma, right?
Doug Williams, Oklahoma, and then they merged with the Arizona Wranglers. Don't get me going. I'll go on for hours. I love the USFL. It's like my childhood, and watching those games was the best thing ever. Commanders, like it, dislike it, Eric.
As a longtime fan of the San Antonio Commanders of the AAF, I think they're ripping off our name. No, it's fine. I agree with Jeff. I think the Washington was, they took too long to get rid of the first name. They had 2 seasons. Honestly, I had a tweet. I thought it was pretty funny. They'll always be the football team to me, But I sort of like that name. I wish they would have gone with it. They weren't working with a full deck though. And that franchise we didn't talk about the Snyder thing. Maybe that'll eventually come up. But like that team can't do anything right? Like in the eyes of many. So like they probably picked the sort of most like down the middle name or whatever. But now they look like one of those teams that's like on a longest yard, that's being coached by like Adam Sandler or something.
I think we did whiff on this. Cam Dog's right. The Washington Generals are the Ollies to the Globetrotters. You can't really name yourself after the team that's paid to go get their ass kicked by somebody throwing buckets of confetti in their face. I mean, that just can't happen. So I do think that's probably a reason why.
You just pissed off CNL Sooner too with your reference to the Oklahoma football team in the USFL.
It was the Oklahoma Outlaws, right? I guess it wasn't.
I guess they were in Tulsa, not Oklahoma City.
My bad. And,
come on, Soren.
A guy with
Mr. USFL.
A guy with Sooner in his name. I'm not going to argue about right. Oklahoma. I will say this: I thought Curtis Siebel, who works with me on the radio show, had a good point. Washington, Admiral sounds better to me, right? If you wanted the military hook, If Commanders was what you wanted, the DC Commanders sounds better to me. Like, drop the Washington and go with DC, but I think they like their W or their logo. Washington Admirals flows better, and DC Commanders flows better to me. I like the idea of Red Tails. I like what it symbolized. I thought it would have been a great way to somewhat make amends, And it was a perfect opportunity, and it was right there, and they didn't take it.
Wrong franchise to make smart moves. You're asking a lot.
Well said. Well said. All right, that's going to do it for us. We'll get into the Super Bowl big time next week here on Too Deep. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live every Thursday on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook and on Twitter, so you can catch us live Thursdays at 9 o'clock. And we, appreciate all the nice comments. Go ahead and give us some likes, give us some loves, give us some follows. Let all your friends know about the podcast. We would appreciate it. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, you can see his work at PFF.com. My name is Soren Petro. You can catch my radio show at 810WHB.com. We will see you next week on 2 Deep.